Okay, so the folks at Broudy Precision, we're having discussions with our contractors, with our customers, and we're seeing a rise in um, applications where the end user customers are requiring or looking for biofiltration, UV filtration. So in our sales meetings, we decided to put together a quick overview of the technology behind it and some of the opportunities that may be out there for our contractors to go to their customers with. So maybe I put together a deck here. It's only like 15 or 13 slides or something, so it won't be that long. But it's a um, basic technology overview and some of the options that we have as contractors, or some of our contractors might have. And let's begin with the what's going on in our country right now, this Corona-19 thing, which is a virus. And viruses, they don't reproduce on their own, but they do have genetic material, either DNA or RNA. And they reproduce by attaching to cells, injecting their DNA. So there's a couple of different ways that happens. The viruses first out of infected cells, this is called lytic cycle, while others merge into infected cells, reproducing every time the cell divides. That's lysogenic. So that's how they spread. They don't spread typically by getting in the air and breathe it. Normally what happens is they're on surfaces of things, and we put those surfaces or those things in contact with our bodies, and that's how they get in. They have no form of locomotion on their own, so they need something else to move them around. And once they attach to cells, that's how they spread, by reproducing, essentially. So everyone has gotten sunburn, or most people have gotten sunburn at some point. So you had a taste of how UV light kills the viruses. And what we're doing really is we're damaging the DNA of the virus or the microorganism. It doesn't have to necessarily be viruses. But the whole technology is for UV light is centered around the reproductive cycle of the microbe. DNA molecules are made up of two strands bound together by four bases. And forgive my pronunciation here: adenine, cysteine, or cytosine, guanine, and thymine. These bases are acting like an alphabet for the DNA sequence and instructions for the cells to reproduce. Okay, so what does that mean? The UV causes the thymine bases to fuse together. It scrambles the DNA sequence and essentially like messes up the reproductive instruction at the DNA level. Since it's no longer correct, the sequence is no longer correct. Replicate properly. And this is how UV light annihilates viruses. It does it by destroying their ability to reproduce. So we're not killing them on contact necessarily, but what we are doing is we're killing them off by not being able to reproduce and spread to other cells. So in this particular climate the country is currently in, a lot of people have been asking, does this technology affect the COVID-19? And depending on where you look at, you look it up. This is such a new technology and a new virus, of course. It is difficult to get a hard answer on whether or not this technology will destroy the COVID-19, but what we're reading, what I've been reading, what I've been seeing, SARS and MERS, previous coronaviruses. They've had studies on both SARS and MERS, and they show that UV light could inactivate the virus. So it is not unreasonable to expect that it will have the same effect on COVID-19. That sentence has a lot of double negatives in it. What they're saying essentially is the UV light should have an effect on COVID-19 if it behaves at all like SARS. I then wanted to talk a little bit about the technology. So we have different types of light that are available to us. Natural ultraviolet light, or UV, is generated by the sun. It's part of the light spectrum. So the light spectrum is shown on the right here. Everybody's kind of heard of most of these different waveforms. Radio waves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma, cosmic rays, and they're listed from long wavelength at the top to the shorter wavelengths at the bottom of the list there. And most sources of light generate some UV. Okay, for air, surface, and water disinfection, the UVC is a particular form of UV light, and it's generated by UV systems with ultraviolet lamps, which in most cases, it looks like ordinary fluorescent tubes. So UV comes in a couple of different flavors. It's been categorized in these 5 different, I guess they're called wavelengths. And we measure these particular wavelengths now in this, because the wavelengths are all over the chart. These are measured in nanometers, and a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. So it's very, very, considerably short. There are shorter in the light spectrum, but what we're looking for is something in the area of 280 nanometers to 200 nanometers, and that's considered germicidal UV basically at 254 nanometers. So what that technology is telling us is for air and surface water disinfection, this is the wavelength that we are looking for germicidal UV light protection. So there's some downsides to this. The unintentional exposure causes skin redness, eye irritation. Some people have said in the past, and I've read in a lot of different places, that the skin is susceptible to cancer, and the eyes are susceptible to cataracts. But there's this guy at Harvard, and he is saying that it does not cause skin cancer or cataract. So I'm getting conflicting information. I just thought I'd throw that out there. It's not worth the safety factor, in my opinion. So one of the objects of this Tech Tuesday demonstration or presentation is there's a safety factor here that we wanted to talk about, and we also wanted to discuss the technology and the opportunity, but we think that there is safety that should be observed when using this technology. So the longer wavelengths of UV described here are not produced by germicidal UV lamps, okay? They're part of complete UV spectrum produced by the sun or some specialty lamps, like black lights and stuff. Everybody's got like the black light that they have for, for parties and stuff like that. You see them on TV, the crime units go in and look for certain fluids and stuff through black light. The UVB, it's a small but a dangerous part of the sunlight. Most solar UVB is absorbed by our ozone layer circling the planet. And here again, because if you have prolonged exposure, you'll get a burn from UVB, and it can result in unhealthy effects of the skin and eyes. everybody's had, or most people have had a sunburn, and they don't quickly forget that experience. UVA is a long wave UV, comparatively speaking. And this is what you'll see in these tanning booths. And there are some effects on the skin that you'll see. For the purposes of our discussion, germicidal ultraviolet is where we're going to concentrate our discussion. Okay, so the effect on microbes, not just viruses, it's other things. So it kills germs such as bacteria. There are viruses, molds, fungi, spores that transmit infections, causes allergies, trigger asthma attacks, and cause other unhealthy effects. Now, here again, the UV destroys the DNA of these microbial contaminants, rendering them sterile. The microbes are irradiated with enough dosage germicidal UV, they can no longer reproduce and over time disappear from the indoor environment. Airborne germs and surface mold colonies exist in the very tight buildings that we all live in nowadays. And there's this discussion that's been around for a while about the unhealthy buildings. And what in this slide here, it's calling indoor pollution. And the inside air can be worse than the outside air. And there's a lot of reasons why that can happen. Coils on air ducts and HVAC systems are offering breeding grounds for pathogenic bacteria and allergenic and toxic fungal contaminants, which also cause allergies, asthma, and other respiratory problems. Our germicidal UV systems can help keep the indoor environment healthier and the HVAC systems clean and top performance shape. There's a savings that is realized when there are people not calling in sick to work. Our coils are more efficient because we don't have the contamination growing on them. Our service technicians that are out there are often cleaning coils, and one of the things they're cleaning off these coils and keeping them from being efficient is some of these microorganisms that get stuck on there. The people that are like suffering from allergies and asthma, headaches, and other problems contributed to the contamination of these microorganisms will be greatly reduced if we can keep these microorganisms under control. So the germicidal UV systems that we see in today's industry, there's a direct air and surface disinfection by an unshielded UV lamp, which irradiate all air and surfaces directly exposed to the lamp. So, you know, somebody's walking around with a wand or something like that, and they're applying things directly to the surfaces. Another form is direct air and surface sterilization by UV lamps with reflectors to intensify the light. Same sort of idea. And then there's the air disinfection by enclosed UV lamps, which irradiate the air passing through the UV system by a fan that's moving the air or natural convection. Units can't be used for surface disinfection because the light is enclosed. It's usually inside of an air handler or something, or it's directed to the upper air above the eye level, so the UV can be used in occupied rooms. There is the water UV filtration system, which in Sometimes we see that when we're controlling labs. They will have us monitor the UV filtration for water, and basically what they're doing is they're passing water through a UV light filter of some sort to kill microorganisms that way. All right, so effectiveness. So the effectiveness, this is where I had my biggest trouble wrapping my head around, because it's going a lot, there's a lot of variables that will affect the effectiveness of this technology. And the more I got into it and read about it, and I do not claim to be an expert, but I did some reading and I got a little bit trained up on it. And the more I read, the more I noticed that there's flaws in this technology. There's a lot of variables. So, and some of those variables I'll talk about here. So a lot of how well this technology works is the length of time a microorganism exposed to the UV, the intensity of the wavelength of the UV radiation. There are other things like the presence of particles that can protect the microorganisms from the UV, the microorganism's ability to withstand UV during its exposure, mutated type microorganisms. It can be used to disinfect the air with prolonged exposure. So disinfection is a function of the UV intensity and time, at very, very shortly put. So what does that mean? Now, like if I have an air handling unit that's 15,000 CFM, it's moving 2,200 feet per minute in velocity, maintaining 1.5 inches of static. That's an awful lot of air that we're moving, and we're moving it very, very quickly. So if you put in a UV filter, UV light rack, UVC light rack on the leaving side of the chilled water coil, it might take more than one pass of that air to effectively do its job and dramatically reduce the microorganisms. That's why, like, you know, surface stuff, you're going to have a greater chance because you can control the amount of time that you can direct the light on that surface. But when you're, we're not as effective when we're moving air, because the lamp, there's a bunch of different variables. If the lamps are installed perpendicular to the airflow, you're reducing the amount of time that the air is in contact with that wavelength, that light wavelength. Whereas if you're with the airstream, you're going to be exposing that airstream for a longer period of time. Usually they're freestanding units with shielded UV lamps, and we use a fan to force the air past the UV light. Some of the systems that I've seen also, you know, they can live inside of a room, but they'll have an air that draws, they'll have a fan that draws air from the room across the light and then passes it back into the room. A lot of times what we'll see is the best practice is you'll see these UV lamps installed on the leaving side of a chilled water coil or a drip pan, and then you'll see another one downstream a little bit further. We don't always have in air handlers that kind of space to be putting on all kinds of UV light racks. So that may or may not be an option. So what you do there is you have to have more intense UV light for the area in which you're installing them. It's got to be more intense. And the key to this form of sterilization is the placement of the UV lamps. Good filtration systems to remove the dead microorganisms. That's our pleated filters or our bag filters or something like that. The reason that, you know, UV technology has become so important, not only because of the biohazard, it's also, we can't be installing HEPA filters in all these air because of the pressure drop across the filter. We're just not going to be able to move as much air with all this filtration going on at the micron level. So forced air systems by design impede the line of sight, thus creating errors in the environment that we share by the UV light. A UV lamp placed at the coils and the drain pans of cooling systems will keep microorganisms from forming in these naturally damp places. That's the best practice right there. Talked about this a little bit already. So UV disinfection of HVAC coils. Now we're going to keep the coils clean of biofilm and mold growth. And there's the GSA standard for public buildings that's now talking about UVC emitters and lamps shall be incorporated downstream of all cooling coils and drain pans to control airborne surface microbial growth and transfer. So that's going to be, we may see this in the very near future, especially with what's going on in our country. It'll be a matter of compliance. Our HVAC airstream disinfection, high output UV lamps, this is what I was talking about. Sometimes we don't always have the space to put in multiple racks, so we're going to need to use high output UV lamps that are designed specifically for cold and fast moving air in the HVAC air ducts. This is probably the main application that our contractors, our customers are going to be using. In-room UV fixtures, this is what I was talking about, where it directs the air from surfaces and indirect air radiation from operating rooms, labs, etc., runs it with a fan through this UV process and then puts the air back into the room. The portable units, easy to carry. You can put it in different locations, single room, and we also have the water UV disinfection. Usually that is a lamp in a stainless steel chamber that the water passes. Okay, now this is kind of what I was talking about with the properly designed applied HVAC coil disinfection. The UV system is put on the leading side of the coil, and the coil is represented here by this box. The UV light on the leading side of the coil, the airflow passes through it, and then you have airstream irradiation upstream of the coil. That's another bank of UV lights after the coil, if you have the space. And you'll notice it's not perpendicular to the airflow. It is parallel to the airflow. Kind of important because it greatly increases the exposure of the light to the microbes. They're talking here about UV water disinfection. A pre-filter should be installed before the UV system. Most of the time when I do any kind of water disinfecting, there's always a pre-filter built into those systems, and they usually come on a rack. Sometimes you see them like put together, but usually they're purchased as a single unit. And then I wanted to kind of talk about using this technology with safety. When we have air handlers as shown here, and they're sitting up on a roof or they're sitting in a mechanical room, you can't really see inside those units because they're closed systems, of course. So what I've shown here, I have a supply and a return fan, and you'll see a chilled water coil here and a high output UV lamp on the leading side of that coil. The airflow is passing from left to right in this diagram. Everybody that's worked on air handlers, rooftop units, all know that they have access doors and access panels that are built in. And this is for maintenance or access to things like freestats or filters, things like that. What we have worked with in the past is we've come up with a UV safety panel at Broudy Precision. We started building them around 2014. Ernie Eichenberg and I worked with a contractor that came to us with an application. He sort of let us know what they were looking to do, and we designed a panel to meet his needs. What we are seeing with the outbreak of the current environment is a surge of these panels being sold. So our contractors are installing these ultraviolet germicidal irradiation systems, and they're buying our safety panel to control them. It's essentially a straight stick or completely electrical panel that is intended to immediately turn the UV lighting circuit off if any of the doors around the UV light rack are open. There are often multiple doors. They'll see 2, 3, 4 doors per air handling unit compartment where these UV racks are installed. And we'll install magnetic switches that will wire back to a panel. And at any time a door is open, the lights are immediately turned off. For safety of the occupant or safety of the maintenance person or the technician working on the equipment, changing the bulbs, inspecting the equipment, whatever. So nobody is going to be subject to this UV light for any kind of period of time. UV safety panels also provide a means of electrical disconnect. So main power is brought to this panel and the distribution to the racks is from this panel, but we provide an electrical disconnect on the face of the panel, as well as start-stop buttons to turn it on and off manually, as well as indication, so you don't have to open the door to see if the light's on. And we also, because one of the variables on the intensity of this technology is over time, the UV bulbs begin to dim or get less intense. So we recommend that they are replaced yearly, if not, before a year, whether they're burned out or not. So it keeps them intense at all times. That pretty much is the end of my slide deck here. So if there are any questions, Ernie and I can answer about what we're doing with contractors that are using these panels, and if there's any questions that we could have at this time.
This is Ron from SDA. I have a question. When you talked about sensitivity to skin and eyes causing cataracts, that type of thing, that's obviously only if you're exposed to the actual UV light, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's why these panel doors, these panel safety panels that we make, as soon as the doors open, it opens the circuit for the lighting and it turns the UV lights off. So the safety of the technician or the maintenance individual that's working inside the chamber is never compromised.
And I'll just add, Ron, that if the door's open, lights are off, doors shut, lights stay off until someone goes to this panel and says, I'm ready to turn the lights back on. So it's the safety is the utmost concern there. And some of these rooftop units are really big and have the wattage on the UV bulbs is significant enough that if a technician were to look directly at it, he could really have problems. So It's really a safety thing that, and these are being installed in hospitals. So,
Yeah, so these UV lights that you're seeing the aftermarket where it's just the one light, and I'm not sure of the the power or wattage or whatever that they are, but they have no kind of safety like that, correct? Like they're being
Correct.
okay. And are
Correct. You're basically buying fluorescent tubes. They're essentially like I've seen them in LED. I've seen them in fluorescent. They're mercury vapor, but there's no safety, zero.
okay.
to give you an idea, ballpark, when we make these panels to be installed outdoor on a rooftop unit with one switch, so this is one heavy duty magnetic door switch, you're looking at about $2,200 to one of our contractors. For the indoor rated panels, so as long as a NEMA 1 enclosure will suffice, same technology, which you're looking at about $1,700. And if you have interest in that, please reach out to me. I'll be glad to get you a formal quote, and we can go from there.
Sounds good.
That's just the control, though.
Hey,
Ernie.
yeah. Hey, Ernie, Tom Rinaldi.
No lights included.
So I've been getting a lot of texts and emails from customers around here asking, okay, what information do they need to give us in order to quote this? Can they see a panel, see what it looks like? Do we have options for lights? What brands do we rep for lights? So if we can give some info on how to actually sell and apply these things, I think that'd be good.
I think it's also important to point out that we're installing a lot of these. We're selling a lot of these panels, these safety panels for UV germicidal irradiation systems that are going in hospitals, but don't necessarily have to in hospital units. You could put them in regular office buildings as well, because of buildings are tight nowadays. They're built so that there's not a lot of infiltration from outside. So you have all of these things that are building up, and there is a reduced sick time. People not calling in sick because they're healthier, because these organisms are kept at bay. So they could be used in office buildings, in regular type air handling unit applications, not just in hospitals. And I think in today's climate, there's an opportunity for all you guys that are working with your customers to say, hey, this is an opportunity, a good time to install this technology. And to talk about the savings, I mean, if you just talk about from people calling in sick, the absence of productivity, the maintenance that's required on chilled water coils for the crap that builds up on them. Every service technician in the world knows what it's like cleaning a chilled water coil.
Hey, Tom, after the meeting, I'll give you a call and we can discuss some marketing plan.
So is it possible to kind of go through some of that now? I mean, we have a ton of customers on here. I think it would be good to kind of get into it, how they can sell it. We still have time. Maybe we can show a drawing from one. Maybe we can do something like that.
To be honest, the issue with the actual lamps is, though I'm working on trying to get an exclusive line, we don't have one beyond Honeywell right now. And Honeywell is basically rated up to a 5-ton unit, which is coil irradiation, and that's fine for light commercial. But when we're looking at, the units that we've been working with are 10, 20, 40-ton units. They're using Atlantic fixtures and bulbs, and we can certainly get Atlantic. I guess maybe the best thing to do is to come up with maybe a sizing chart slash pricing thing, which I don't have right now, but I could certainly get that out via email.
Yeah, there's an enormous push in this country right now for this technology. So the vendors and the people that we have been talking to, Ernie and I have been talking to, they're having trouble keeping up with orders, as you can imagine. Not quite like toilet paper, but it's pretty intense.
I was a little distracted at the beginning, but so basically you guys said is there any actual evidence that this does kill COVID-19 though?
Yes.
There is, okay. Is there any we can get our hands on that?
Here, I got to preface that. I mean, the COVID viruses like MERS and
SARS.
It has definitely been proven effective, and it is in the same family, so it's reasonable to assume the COVID-19 would also fall in that category. But it's too new of a virus to have any kind of testing for conclusive proof. But what we're reading, what I'm seeing is that it's reasonable to assume that this technology will irradiate that. And again, the only way viruses are getting into the air systems is because they're attaching to other things. And the HVAC systems are distributing them throughout the building. It's kind of a problem,
Right.
Frank Reno, how you doing?
Hi.
How's it going?
Okay.
As you know, in the past, we've done a lot with germicidal 213 installations, everything from daycare facilities to laboratories. And what we have noticed over the years at different manufacturers, that the quality level varies on the drivers, on these fixtures. It does affect the longevity of the equipment. Also, there's another secondary issue that starts to happen sometimes inside of the air handlers. That the light itself starts to degrade the insulation inside the machines, and the older machines. Not so much the foil, it's stuff with the older fiberglass systems. People should be aware of that situation. Another thing we just started recently playing with is carbon activated systems in combination with the UV 213 germicidals, and had a lot of interesting results with it. Very effective. Efficacy is incredible. What we're finding, we also don't need to run these things 24/7, and you got to be careful creating ozone in certain types of the UVB systems, which are notorious for creating ozone. And that's sometimes an unwanted derivative of this. So you have to use cold. That's why that saturation factors, understand the saturation factor and the outside air changes are critical. So ASHRAE, I think it's ASHRAE 60.1 with regards to systems are ducted and how the amount of outside air is critical. So these systems are correctly balanced. We're getting that fresh air curtain coming through. Particularly becomes more critical in testing laboratories. It does. And also, we're noticing this in office spaces as well. And the efficacy is well worth the money that was installed for the collateral effects of what happens in these spaces. Secondarily, what's starting to happen too is a lot of these older buildings have a problem with the air distribution as far as the insulation of the ductwork itself. Sterilization is green dioxide, gas fogging, able to clean these buildings up. There's a tremendous opportunity here for every mechanical contractor out there if they understand this part of it. It gets you involved a little bit in the industrial hygiene side of the business. And what these firms are calling industrial hygiene firms that are going through the space and they're touching on HVAC, but they really get into depth about understanding about the installation side of those products as well. So this other part of that hygiene, industrial hygiene, has to be addressed, and that'd be another whole set of product line to talk about there. Just wanted to touch on that with you.
Thank you. That was informative. Just think that there's a. I just think that there's an opportunity for a lot of our customers, for you guys to go back to your customers, especially in this time. Hate to use the term, scare your customer into it, but it's a really good time now to possibly have an opportunity. You could obviously parlay that into other work when you're working on these air systems. Thought it would be a good opportunity to bring this up and have a little discussion on it. I mean, as I said, I don't consider myself to be an expert, but what we are seeing is an uptick in the installation of these systems. We at Broudy Precision provide this panel for stopping electrical disconnect. But you may see opportunities is the whole point here. We are working on figuring out how we can implement on larger systems. As Ernie was saying, the Honeywell offering is up to about light commercial. So we're trying to figure out on larger scale units the best application and the best manufacturer to go with at this time. Is that correct, Ern?
Yeah, and unfortunately, due to what's going on, the big issue I'm finding is hooking up with somebody that has any inventory. So I've been working with a couple different guys like Atlantic Lamp, who makes a nice product. Problem is some of their fixtures and lamps are 8 to 12 weeks back order right now, and so I have some stuff on order with them. I don't want to promote a particular line and then have any of the people that are on the phone here go out and sell it, and then I have to tell you you're looking at 3 months to get any product if I can avoid that. So maybe we have a part 2 where we can come back and say we have a line that has adequate inventory and we are stocking the following fixtures and lights, and then you can offer that. I mean, at this point, what we can turn around pretty quick for you are the panels, but the issue I'm having is the fixtures and the lights are back ordered everywhere I've checked, and it's been several sources that have told me that's industry wide. So I'm going to continue to look at that. Joe Chandler's checking with some of his sources right now as we speak. So hopefully we can follow up and say, here, we have some inventory. Here's what we can do for you. There are a lot of units out there already that have UV lights. A lot of times you order a rooftop unit, and particularly in any hospital or medical center applications, they come with the units. So whether it's McQuay, Carrier, etc., UV is an option just like an economizer is anymore. So a lot of times that's there, and all they have is like a light switch or a little portal on the side of the unit to see how the light's burned out or it's on or it's off. The panel we sell is a much safer way to go. So that is something that right now, again, there's a lot of UV lights out there that if you just need replacement bulbs, that certainly our sales team can try to help you with just getting a bulb. Inventory is going to be an issue, but the panels we can turn around pretty quick.
Hey, do you guys usually put a copy of this on your website that can be listened to afterwards?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Every Tech Tuesday is up on BP Tech Center. You will also find a number of small, I don't know, they're videos or whatever, they're recordings that we put on YouTube for different applications. Frank Whitmer, I did a couple. Matthew has done a bunch. So if you go up on BP Tech Center, there's a lot of information there for you guys to check into with regard to, you know, different aspects, different industries like Well and Johnson, and Matthew's done a great job with the networking, and because we were actually gonna talk a little bit about, you know, MSTP versus IP based controllers, but Matthew's done a networking 101 and he's broken it into pieces, so they're, you know, you don't have to listen to 4 hours at once. It's smaller segments. Frank's done a bunch on Johnson and with the Tritium product line as well. So yeah, go up on BP Tech Center. All the Tech Tuesdays are there, plus the other YouTube videos that we've been doing. Okay, anybody else? All right, well, silence means I guess we're good. So hopefully we'll see you guys. We'll see you next Tuesday. And have a good week. Stay safe, everyone.
You too.
Take care,
Sounds
guys.
good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.